Hello everyone, this is Daughter Darkness, and today I'm going to be talking about Star Wars The Last Jedi. I mentioned in the top 9 Star Wars film video a couple of weeks ago, where I put The Last Jedi at number 1, that I would make a video kind of explaining why I love it so much. And I basically turned this into a whole review. Of course, I know how divisive this film is. Some people, like me, love it, some people hate it, and then obviously a lot of people are in the middle. So chances are there are going to be people who watch this video who completely disagree with what I'm saying. And that's absolutely fine. Please leave any thoughts that you have in the comments section. As long as you remain respectful, obviously. You know, if you respect my opinion, I'll respect yours and all that kind of great stuff. So just before we get into the actual meat of this, I will be talking about spoilers freely here. So if you haven't seen The Last Jedi yet, I'd recommend watching it before you get back to watching this video. Okay, so just as a little bit of an overview of the events that happen and all that stuff. The opening action scene, I think it's pretty good. I think it does a good job of building up tension and all that sort of stuff, even though it's centered around a character that we don't really know that well. I mean, Paige, when she's trying to release the bombs and she just does it at the last minute before her ship gets destroyed. I think it was a pretty good action scene to open on, as, you know, that build-up of tension and then the relief once those bombs actually drop. However, this does contain one of the examples of probably the worst element of this film, which is the humour. Honestly, most of the jokes in this film, they're not very funny. In this scene, the first one, when it's like, Leia's got a message for you, it's about your mother. Yeah, that's not very funny, is it? Some of them are, and that's fine. I do think, though, that they're pretty harmless. I don't think that they ruin the film with their presence. I think the film knows, for the most part, when to be serious, and I think that's the most important thing. For an example of this done wrong, we go to a film that released a couple of months earlier from The Last Jedi, and that's Thor Ragnarok, where there are jokes and slapstick moments and all that stuff constantly, even in really serious moments, and it just makes it impossible to take any of it seriously. So here I think the humour itself could be better, but in terms of its placement, I think for the most part the film knows when to get serious, and that's what matters. So moving on in the film, we have all these scenes on Acto with Rey and Luke, obviously, and I think all of that stuff's great, as well as all the stuff with the Force bond between Rey and Kylo Ren. It did keep me invested as we learned about the Force, you know, similar lessons to what we'd had before, but from a different angle, because Luke was teaching the ways of the Jedi from the point of, and this is the wrong way to do things. And I just think that was an interesting dynamic to introduce. In terms of the middle act, where you've got this training stuff, and Rey sort of on her own journey and all that, and then you've got the stuff with the Resistance, and then you've got the stuff on Canto Bight, it does start to drag a little bit during the middle, and I think, you know, the first two elements of that I really like. Canto Bight, I don't hate it as much as most people seem to, but it is definitely the weakest part of the film, and I think the fact that it's up against such stuff that I really do like, it does make it worse by comparison. And it does mean that the film in the middle suffers a bit from too much going on at once syndrome. The ending, meanwhile, I think brings everything together quite nicely, and there's a few nice moments. The final scene itself, I think, is really well done, and it's the perfect ending for the film. So in terms of structure, I think there's a bit of issue in the middle of the film, but for the most part, I don't mind it. I think it's pretty good. But for me, the most important thing in a Star Wars film, or honestly any kind of film, it's the main characters and the interactions between them and the growth of the characters and all of that sort of stuff. So I'm just going to sort of take a character at a time now, starting with our main characters, Rey and Kylo Ren. I think it was a really nice change what they did here. It changed from the usual formula where you've got, you know, the villain off doing villain things, then the hero's off doing hero things. Now you've got the two of them having this bond together, and they're constantly talking to each other. While they're on opposite sides of the conflict, they find in each other someone to confide in. And I think the fact this happens, you know, after they've already fought, and the consequences of Rey defeating Kylo and Kylo murdering Han Solo, it's still there, but they're able to get past that somehow and become closer as a result. And I think that works quite well with what they're doing, that they're counterparts in the Force. Rey is the light side counterpart to Kylo Ren's dark side, but they're both people, and they're both a little bit more complicated than that. Rey has tendencies towards the dark, Kylo has tendencies towards the light. And it's about them just trying to find their place in things. In the end, they sort of take over from their masters, Rey in a much more peaceful way than Kylo, of course, but they're on opposite sides of the conflict, and in many ways I think they believe similar things, and they can understand where each other is coming from. But I think the difference is that Rey has a respect for human life, well, life generally, that Kylo doesn't have. He's willing to murder and hurt people to achieve his goals, and Rey isn't willing to do that. And I think that's the important, decisive difference that should separate the good guys from the bad guys. The bad guys, they don't think they're bad, but they're just willing to do things that aren't right to achieve their goals. So everything there, really like. And then on to the slightly more divisive part of things with Luke Skywalker. So where we left off with Luke Skywalker at the end of Return of the Jedi, he just had his biggest victory. He'd saved his father from himself, and he'd helped to destroy the Emperor and the Empire. And this is something that we obviously know from real world news. When someone does something like that, they get glorified. And Luke is painted, both in the Star Wars universe and in the real world, as a legend. The hero of the rebellion and all that sort of stuff. And that is able to grow over the 30 years that Luke is gone. And he's pursuing his own things and learning about the Jedi and everything. So this legend just builds up and builds up until we're at the point in The Force Awakens where Leia and the Resistance kind of feel like Luke coming back would turn the tide by itself. But the thing is, behind all this, he's still a man. And I think the way that they decided to have his character in this was brilliant. Because he isn't just some great leader, great Jedi and all that. He's just a man. A broken man who's haunted by his past mistakes and the stuff he's learnt about the past mistakes of the Jedi. And he can't live with himself anymore. There's obviously that infamous scene of him trying to kill Kylo Ren, which, okay, he didn't. He thought about it for a second. Having learnt about the failures of the Jedi in the past to stop the rise of the dark side, he thought for a moment, maybe I can. But then, of course, he realised what he was about to do, but it was too late. And he sort of caused the thing that he was trying to prevent. Ultimately, he does get his original wish, and he dies. But he dies in a much better place, a much more peaceful place than he had been throughout most of the film. And he is able to save the Resistance in the end. Not as a legend, but as a man. And I think that is just a perfect and beautiful way to end things for an iconic character. Now for the other controversially portrayed person, Supreme Leader Snoke. He is basically just the Emperor from Return of the Jedi in this. He's manipulating things, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, but him as a character isn't that important. And I think that's what they're going for here. I don't need to have an origin story for Supreme Leader Snoke to understand his role in the story. He's the leader of the First Order, and he's Kylo Ren's master. That is the extent of what we need now. I'm sure they will explore his origin somewhere, but for now I don't see why that is a reason to dislike this film. Because, yes, he is killed off before he has a chance to do a huge amount, but that's an important moment for Kylo Ren. And I think the way that they kind of talked about it was, okay, this journey we're going on with Kylo in Episode 8, we can't end it with him kneeling at Snoke's side. And I think that at the end of the day, that's priorities. A big moment for the main characters is more important than a big moment for the side characters. So Supreme Leader Snoke was sort of shafted to one side a little bit, but I don't think it really matters. So that's the A plot of the film gone, and then on to the B plot. And that's everything that goes on with the Resistance, particularly between Poe Dameron and Vice Admiral Holdo. And again, this is a dynamic that I really liked. Poe has obviously already made a mistake early in the film that he still feels justified having made, because he did take out the Dreadnought, but he did so at a cost that he shouldn't be paying. And then Leia's removed from the picture. And, I mean, that scene with her, like, flying down and all that. I mean, I think visually it looks a little bit goofy, but I don't mind its place in the film, and I think there's nothing wrong with her having to be removed from the picture there for a while. So she's replaced with Vice Admiral Holdo, who is not nearly as inspiring and is a lot more firm, and she sort of wants things to go her way, and she isn't as willing to listen to people like Poe as Leia would be. And the thing is, because we're shown everything from Poe's perspective, it kind of looks throughout the film as though Holdo is at best incompetent and at worst evil. In many ways, I was expecting her to be a First Order spy, but then Leia returns, and that moment when Poe kind of puts his gun down and then Leia stuns him, I think that's a really good moment, a really powerful moment for both of them, as Poe realizes that he's not in the right in this situation. And I think it's subversion like this where The Last Jedi really shines. I remember the line in the trailer from Luke of, "This is not gonna go the way you think," or whatever it was. And that's pretty much The Last Jedi in the nutshell. And in this case, thinking with your heart, it can work. It works throughout certainly the prequel trilogy, but also the original trilogy. Mainly stuff involving Anakin Skywalker or Han Solo, it will normally pay off. But not always. That's not always the best thing to do. You do have to think with your mind sometimes. And that allows Poe to grow as a result, that he actually thinks things through a bit more towards the end. He restrains himself from going out and helping Luke fight Kylo Ren because he knows the Resistance has to survive. It's not enough to damage the First Order a bit. As far as Holdo is concerned, as I said, she's presented as almost a villain, but she's one of the great heroes of the story. Her sacrifice, along with Luke's, is what saves the Resistance in the end. And that's the sort of thing that I really like seeing. And then onto the C-plot. As I said, the weakest part of the film, and that's everything involving Finn and Rose. But also, I don't think it's terrible. I think it's just alongside two other plots that are so much more interesting and so much better that it looks bad by comparison. The setting of Canto Bight I think is pretty good. I think it's nice to see another side of things, the business side of war. And that's where DJ comes in. Now, I don't particularly like DJ as a character, but I think he does a good job of presenting a different view of war. No good guys, no bad guys, only business, and all that sort of stuff. It's a bit more of a grey area. And the fact that he presents that to Finn, who doesn't really feel any belonging with the Resistance, I think it just helps Finn to learn who he is. Rose thought he was a Resistance hero, and by the end of the film he becomes it. As far as Rose is concerned, her existence is mainly there to get the best out of Finn, and I think she does a pretty good job of that. I know she's the character everyone loves to hate, but I don't mind her. I think that the stuff with her sister and the background of the First Order destroying her home planet and all that sort of stuff, I think that's pretty good, a good motivator. And the whole thing of, we'll win this war, not by destroying what we hate, but saving what we love. I mean, practically, it doesn't really make much sense, because sometimes you have to do both. But I think it's quite a nice Star Wars-y quote. It shows the different priorities and the nature of the Resistance. If you can kill the enemy or save a child, you save the child. So this bit, I think it's okay. And it does a good job of growing Finn's character a bit to get him where he needs to be in Episode 9. But it's definitely the weakest part of the film, and it does feel kind of like an add-on that doesn't really fit in with anything quite as well until the final scene of the film at least. But it's a nice presentation of the themes and everything, so I don't mind it so much. Now into the ending. The Battle of Crate itself I think is good. The stuff with the speeders is fine. It's serviceable. I don't know if it's like the greatest battle in the series or anything like that. But the scenes with Luke and Kylo Ren at the end are really good. Kylo's now the leader of the First Order. They've lost the man who can think things through. The calm man who doesn't think with his heart, thinks with his brain. He's gone. And Kylo Ren is in his place. Luke knows that, and he uses it to his advantage, because he can manipulate Kylo's emotions, because he knows how Kylo feels about him. And that allows the Resistance to get away. I think the force projection thing was a nice little twist. I didn't clock on for a while. I could kind of guess that as Luke wasn't actually striking back, that something was up. I didn't know it was that, but yeah, I think that was a nice twist of a way to help the Resistance get away while Luke died peacefully. And I think the final scene of him dying was really nicely shot. The music, obviously John Williams' stuff is always good, but the music put in here from A New Hope, obviously the Binary Sunset music, it's really good, really fitting, and nice beautiful end to the character. And then I mentioned the final scene, which I think is really, really good as well. It is this idea, hope can come from anywhere. And that's why I haven't mentioned Rey's parents up to this point, because I really like the fact that Rey's parents are no one. Hope can come from anywhere. It can be the son of Darth Vader. or it can be a girl whose parents sold her for drinking money, or a slave on a casino planet. It can come from anywhere, and I think that's the final message of this film, and it works really well. So yeah, The Last Jedi does have a few flaws, particularly with that C plot in the middle, but despite all that, I think it is the best Star Wars film because it presents its themes and its characters so well, and I enjoy watching it more than any other. So that's everything I have to say about this. If you have a different opinion, or even if you agree with me, feel free to share those thoughts in the comment section below the video. And while you're down there, please like this video if you did, and if you liked it, then check out my other videos and subscribe to this channel. And as always, thank you for watching.